All right. Today we're going to be talking about being unequally yoked in marriage. Uh, You know, uh, Being unequally yoked is a term from the Bible, and in the Christian term, it means a Christian married to a non-Christian. It don't matter if the Christian married to an atheist or somebody that's maybe like a Buddhist or a Mormon. You know, we don't consider Mormons Christians. I'm sorry if you're a Mormon, but that's the truth. If you don't like a comment, we can discuss it offline. Um, the unequally yoked, unlike some people think, it doesn't mean married different races. I mean, I'm not trying to start a controversy here, but when they think unequally yoked, a lot of people think black and white. It's not a black and white thing, or it's not a one race married to another. That's not what unequally yoked means. Um, that's a whole different topic that we're not going to get into today. We're not opposed to the interracial marriage. Um, and we may touch on some of the aspects, but in general, we're not opposed to it. Being unequally yoked, according to the Bible, solely deals with believers in Jesus being in relationship with unbelievers.
Today we're going to go look at what the Bible says about being unequally yoked. I'll get my words out.
Yeah.
We will talk about some specifics on this and modern examples of being unequally yoked. We will also discuss some problems that can arise when a husband and wife are unequally yoked in marriage. We will also give advice on what to do if you are unequally yoked in your marriage.
Okay, so let's begin by reading Second Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 18. I got that. I'm going to go ahead and read that. This is where most people get their Bibles, their scripture from, don't be unequally yoked. We're going to talk about two sections. We're going to talk about Paul's warning. Don't be unequally yoked. It's not pertaining to marriage specifically. It talks about all aspects. I shouldn't have my core group of friends who are not Christians. And it deals with marriage too. And then we're going to talk about marriage specifically. What about those Corinthians that are married to them pagans that are still going to the temple of Zeus or God forbid Aphrodite? Hope them men ain't going to Aphrodite.
Mm-hmm.
Married. Hey, what do you think that men married to Christian women, they go into the temple of Aphrodite? I don't think the wife likes it too much.
No.
But anyways, let me read here. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. Do not be bound together with unbelievers. For what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship have light with darkness? What harmony has Christ with Belial? What has a believer in common with an unbeliever? Or what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. Just as God said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore, come out from among their midst and separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will welcome you, and I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty. I don't see anything in there about different races. I mean, in general, I don't see an issue with one person of a different race marrying another person of a different race as long as they both believe in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that in there. So we're going to talk about that. We're not going to address this like a Sunday school class, Bible study in general, but we are going to go talk about the Bible. Both of us, we're going to read a bunch of Bible verses. So this is look, we're Christian based, Christ centered marriage, and we take everything off the Bible. One of the problems that we have found in the last couple of years is most people, especially Christians, get their view of marriage from the world.
Mm-hmm.
Our view of marriage is from the Bible. So this issue of being unequally yoked, it's going to be from the Bible. So the term unequally yoked is a farming term in general. And in the Bible, it talks about the Jews farming, like back in the days of Israel before Jesus. And in the law of Moses, it spells it out. They have uses for donkeys and they have uses for mules. So when you're plowing the field, I guess you could use two donkeys together, but you wouldn't want to carry a heavy plow because donkeys, they probably wouldn't do good with a heavy plow. Mm-hmm. So for a heavy plow, you have two oxes, big, sturdy oxes, tied together with a yoke, which is that device that they tie together around their necks, mm-hmm. and they plow together. And the Bible says don't use an ox and a donkey. But a lot of marriages where the husband and wife is like the ox and a donkey. It ain't going to work. The Jews would understand this term unequally yoked because they knew about the ox and the donkey. And you can look this up in Deuteronomy 22:10. I'm not going to read that, but Deuteronomy 22:10 where it gets the reference about the ox and donkey.
In 2 Corinthians 6:14 through 18, Paul is instructing us not to be bound together with unbelievers. He goes on to say that there is no partnership between righteousness and lawlessness. He goes on to describe how there can be no agreement between those two that worship idols and those two that worship God. Paul is giving us godly instructions to follow in our marital relationship. From this passage, we see that relationships, especially in marriage, between someone who believes in Jesus Christ and someone who does not, are prohibited. God has always told the people of Israel to separate themselves from the foreigners who worshipped idols. Solomon, being married to hundreds of foreign idol-worshipping women, caused him to do evil in the sight of the Lord.
Right. I'm writing a book. I'll talk about it later, but when in my chapter about unequal yoke, I cited Solomon. I have a lot of issues with Solomon. Yeah, no, I know. He probably was a great man, but I have a problem when it says Solomon's wife turned him away from the Lord. I mean, he had 700 wives. I would say the majority of them were foreigners and they all worship pagan gods. So that Solomon is probably the best or the worst example, however you want to look at it, of not being married to people that worship different gods.
He was wise, but he was a dummy.
He was wise, but he's a dummy. And Samson too. Remember Samson?
Yeah.
Samson had to marry that Philistine girl. He married that Philistine girl, and that was wrong. That prohibited the people of Israel from marrying Philistines. And then he fooled around with that Delilah. Mm-hmm. So in today's term, what is unequally yoked? Like I said before, a lot of people use that as a black and white thing, different races. And that's not what it means. Not talking about different races or ethnicities specifically. In some areas of the world, especially here in the United States, there's still a stigma towards marriages between people of different races, especially here in the United States, especially black and white. Black and white. That's black people shouldn't marry white people. I don't have a problem with any of that. I don't. I know a lot of good people that have mixed marriages. I know a lot of people that in the Air Force and people I work with, their parents were black and white, and I have no problem with that. Some of my best friends in the Air Force were either black people married to white people or white people married to black people, mm-hmm. or the product of one. I don't have a problem with that. Now, the problem is, it don't matter, and it doesn't matter what skin color, ethnicity, or national origin you are, is who you want to marry. If that person doesn't believe in Jesus Christ, that's just the thing. Mm-hmm. That's the thing right there. People ask me, this is theoretical, hypothetical, because we have 3 boys. One's in high school, and he ain't even ready for even talking about marriage. The oldest boy is married, and he got kids. 2 little grandgirls. Awesome grandbabies. And the other boy, he'll be 21 soon, and he's got a girlfriend that he's talking about getting married to. But hypothetically, if one of our boys came home and said, I have a black girlfriend, and I want you to meet her. And I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. Does she believe in Jesus? And then, yes. Well, bring her in. Awesome. I have a girlfriend from Mexico, or Guatemala, or Canada, or France, or whatever. From the Philippines, or from China, or from Japan, wherever. Does she believe in Jesus? Yes. Does she not believe in Jesus? No. If our boy brings home a pale white, true blue European descent woman, a girl, and I say, hey, glad to meet you. You're our boy's girlfriend. Yep. Do you believe in Jesus? Nope. Well, we're against this. Mm-hmm. We're against that. That's the number one thing for us.
That's a deal breaker.
Deal breaker. I don't care if she's white, black, Filipino, Asian, Canadian, French. If she's not a believer in Jesus, that's a deal. If she's a believer in Jesus, there you go.
That's a start.
You're on the right track. if the girl's not a believer, I don't want to, and don't want to be. Well, I'd say you're dating our boy. Any chances you might want to be a believer in Jesus? If the answer is a hard no, I was like, well, I'm a hard no against you dating my boy. Um, I think another issue, along with the unequally yoked, is a man and a woman, two different Christian. So far, Christian beliefs. So far, one of our boys brought home. We go to Baptist churches, and they're different Baptists too.
Mm-hmm.
So if our boy come home and says, I'm dating a Mormon, I'm like, do you like your Mormon faith? Are you willing to part from it? If it's a hard no, like, or even Pentecostal, well, God bless you, but are you willing to become a Baptist? If it's a hard no, I was like, son, this is going to have your marriage is going to be difficult, and I strongly recommend against this. Um, and it doesn't matter if it's a Assembly of God or Methodist or Baptist. I strongly would disagree with allowing our son to marry somebody that doesn't believe the same way we do. You have any thoughts on this, Lauren?
Well, my mom was a Baptist. My dad was Catholic.
Hmm.
And so I grew up with that in my family. And I converted to Baptist when I was 18, but I do clearly remember going to Mass we went to Catholic school, went to Mass. My mom had to convert to Catholicism in order to marry my dad, but she didn't go to Mass with us. She didn't believe in the Catholic faith. She still considered herself Baptist. She read her Bible at home by herself. She watched her TV evangelist. Like, she would not go to Mass with us. So it was never we all went to church as a family thing. It was what my dad believed and what my mom believed. And then, so we grew up Catholic and raised in the Catholic faith. And then we have an older brother, twin sister and older brother. And my older brother's still Catholic, but my sister and I, we both converted to Baptist. We were about 18 in college. So, and then, my parents were married for 25 years. They both passed away before I turned 30. So who knows if, how long they would have stayed married. But my mom refused to divorce my dad. So, they just kind of lived separate lives. They were just kind of roommates. So it wasn't a good marriage. I mean, they got along, I guess, but they weren't close. They weren't, they didn't experience oneness like what we talk about in our videos. That's for sure. So it was definitely a wall between them. It didn't,
Yeah,
it was a divider.
and that's confusing for you and your sister and your brother.
Mm.
You don't know where to go. You don't know which way to go. Should I go with my dad or my mom? It's very confusing, and it kind of divides the family. So, and one more thing before we move on, and that is the discussion of dating someone who is not a Christian. So, and like her example, her mom and dad were married, and they never reconciled their differences in their faith. That's the reality. That's the reality. If you are a Christian and you date someone that's not a Christian, there's a good chance that person will not become a Christian. And we'll talk about that later. But they might. They might. So I would suggest um, you may want to work out those differences before you get married and come to an agreement. And if the person that you're dating who is not a Christian, if they're willing to at least go to church with you, that's a start. And I would, before you even consider getting married, go to church together, see if they're um, convicted. You can't just have a fake. Well, okay, I better fake it. That sweet girl wants me to marry her. She's a Christian, and I better act like I'm a Christian, so I better fake it. That's not what we're talking about. We want to know that the person that you as a Christian are dating, you need to know if that person is going to become a believer or not. If they don't have the conviction, they have no desire to turn away from whatever lifestyle they're in and become a Christian, it's a red flag. I would strongly warn against marrying that person. Um, but I've seen many times in marriages where the husband and wife share these two different beliefs, and it might be, say, Baptist and a Pentecostal, or Catholic and Baptist, like she said. I've seen many times where they never reconcile those differences, and I knew Christians who, when I grew up in a small Baptist church in Kentucky, where we had individuals that went to our church, like a man would go to our church, but his wife would go to Pentecost. Or, I knew people in my neighborhood to where there was a Pentecostal wife and the kids would go with the wife to the Pentecostal church, but the husband wouldn't go anywhere. Wouldn't go anywhere. And that's not good for the family. It's not good for marriage. Lori, do you think there would be a situation where a Christian could marry another Christian who had differences and it would work out?
Well, like I said before, my parents were married for 25 years, but it wasn't a good close relationship. It wasn't what we try to talk about in our videos and what I feel like we have. They didn't. I mean, they were more like just roommates. They didn't like fight all the time or anything, but they just weren't close. They didn't have. I didn't have a good example of what godly marriage looks like growing up. So I really had no idea what that was supposed to look like. Really, until we went to that conference a few years ago. That was fun.
It's probably like the term I used to hear when I was growing up. We're going to stick it out for kids.
Yeah. She would not. And my dad, I won't get into a bunch of stuff, but he wasn't faithful. So, but she stayed with him, and she stuck it out, and but she was not gonna, she was gonna stay to the end, and God bless her, she was committed. But it was not good for us kids because we didn't have that godly example of what a true Christian marriage looked like. I had no idea what that was supposed to look like growing up. And when I was looking for a spouse, I had no idea what to look for. So, I mean, it carries on that what do you call results of consequences, I guess. Those carry on. And, even in some churches we've been to, we've seen marriages last for years and years and years with two different faiths, but they're probably just like what my parents were. They just lived together, but they just stayed married.
Recently, we've seen people, I'm not going to get into details because people may try to put pieces together, but we've seen people that in our church that we know get married and say, oh, great, we're going to see their spouse in church.
Nope.
Never seen their spouse in church. You see them come by themselves. Man, it's wonderful. I just got married. It's great. Where's your spouse? They don't want to come to church. Wow. I would warn against that. I would greatly warn against that. Anything else before we move on?
No, not just, we're not saying that they won't stay married, but I mean, I feel like like we've talked about in our videos, marriage is supposed to be a picture of the gospel to other people. And so if you're both not believers, you both don't have that common faith, it's very hard for you to have that correct picture of what marriage is supposed to be and be able to show others what it's supposed to look like.
And you can't be the proper example of marriage, the one union under God with Jesus Christ as the head of the, you can't be under the headship of Jesus Christ in your marriage if you share two different faiths. That's not being in union with God. That's not being under the headship of Jesus Christ. Okay, next, we're going to transition to another section. We're going to look at what Paul says for the people in Corinth who are already married, but they're in those unequally yoked marriages, not racially or ethnically. They are the Corinthians marrying Corinthians, basically, for the most part. There's different aspects here, talking about slave marriages and arranged marriages, but so basically, Paul's addressing in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 12 through 16, a believer in Jesus Christ married to a pagan, men or women. And what should you do if you're listening to this? You're like, you know what? That's me. I'm married to an unbeliever. What do I do? So Paul's got some instructions, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to go back and forth. We're going to each take a verse and go back and forth and list these situations. We're going to elaborate on it. So let me read this first. It says here, but to the rest I say, not to the Lord, if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he must not divorce her. And a woman who has an unbelieving husband, he consents to live with her, she must not send her husband away. And it's all difficult. And they're probably thinking, Paul, this is difficult. I'm trying to believe in Jesus and trying to live for Jesus, but my husband don't, or my wife don't. It's difficult. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified through her husband, believing husband. For otherwise, your children are unclean, but now they are holy. Yet, if the unbelieving one leaves, let him leave. The brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to go in peace. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? Okay, so that's First Corinthians chapter 7, verses 12 through 16. So let me start. In verse 12, Paul's talking about a Christian man who has an unbelieving wife. I mean, the wife is happy living with him. Just, probably nothing major going on. The marriage is harmonious. She's under submission to him, but she's just not a believer. He is, and he's agonized. Here Paul and probably Timothy, whoever, is saying, don't be yoked with unbelievers. He's like, wow, I'm married to an unbeliever. What do I do? Am I supposed to get rid of him or her? Paul is saying, no, don't get rid of the Christian man who's married to a unbelieving wife. Don't get rid of her. Paul states that if a Christian husband has a non-Christian wife, here in verse 12, that the reason that alone, just because she's an unbeliever, and the marriage is otherwise good, he can't get rid of her just because she's an unbeliever. All right, verse 14 or 13.
Verse 13. If a Christian woman has an unbelieving husband, and the husband is happy with her, she must not divorce him. Again, other than spiritual differences, they have a good marriage. So Paul states that a Christian wife should not divorce her non-Christian husband simply because he doesn't believe as she does.
Right, and it's like he's covering the situation between a husband and wife, different roles. So now verse 14. Paul makes reference to the believing spouse sanctifying the non-believing spouse in marriage. That does not mean that the non-believer will automatically become a Christian because the other spouse is a Christian. And let's say if I wasn't a Christian and she was, and she kept, living a Christian life, and one day I'm just going to wake up and become a Christian, just because of her. She is not going to make me become a Christian, but her influence could persuade me, could cause me to think, what is it about you? You're such a good, kind woman. I'm just a terrible, wicked man. I want to know what it is that makes you the way you are. And that's basically what Paul is saying here. The example of the Christian spouse that the wife sets for the non-Christian spouse might just be enough to cause the other spouse to want to become a Christian as well.
Verse 15 and 16. Paul then states that if the unbelieving spouse leaves the Christian spouse is no longer bound to that spouse that left. Paul is giving us a way out of an unequally yoked, I cannot hardly say that, marriage.
Unequally yoked. Yeah.
But this involves the non-Christian spouse leaving the Christian spouse.
And if, let's say, like, back to the example, if, good Christian woman and I'm a wicked, non-believer, and she treats me good, and I treat her good for the most part, but I'm angry with her because she won't go to the temple of Zeus with me. You need to go. So, well, I ain't going. I don't believe in it no more. I believe in Jesus. Well, I don't like it, Jesus. We are Greeks, and we go to the temple, and I've just had enough. So, and in today's times, we are not Christian. We don't believe in that nonsense. We don't believe in God. I've had enough. So it's going to turn me against her, and it's probably going to turn me towards something else. And it doesn't say that here, but usually that's in our modern terms, that's probably a way for somebody to find a way out. Mm-hmm. I just want out of the marriage, and you end up finding another woman or another man or whatever. So he says if that spouse leaves, chances are, my point is, if the spouse leaves because I say, well, I left because she's a Christian and I don't want to be a Christian. I just had enough of it. Chances are you're probably looking for another person to marry. You're probably close to committing adultery anyway. So anyway, let's sum this up. Number one, we do not recommend you marry someone who is not a Christian or someone who has different Christian beliefs than you have. And you might think, you know what? She goes to an Assembly of God church and I go to Reformed Baptist. I think I'm going to take her to that Reformed Baptist church. And I'll go to her Assembly of God church. You know what's going to hurt? What's it going to hurt for me to go to that Assembly of God church? You know what's going to hurt? You go to that Assembly of God church one time, and she's going to say, well, I don't like your Reformed church. You keep coming to my Assembly of God church. You know, why, I want you to go to my Reformed Baptist church or Methodist or whatever it is,
Mhm.
Nope. You're going to my Assembly of God church. That's what it's going to be.
Mhm.
And that's not going to work. Especially a man or woman that I grew up in the Assembly of God church. I grew up in the Lutheran faith. It ain't going to work.
Mhm.
It's just not going to work. So while you remain married and your spouse remains married, you must set a Christ-like example. If your spouse is an unbeliever, you must set a Christ-like example. And if your marriage is good, you must try to make that marriage work at all costs. But however, if you're married to a non-Christian and they become hostile toward you, and they just I don't like a Christian faith no more. I just can't deal with it anymore. I'm just out. I'm done. You can try to work it out. You can try to persuade them, but if they go, there's really nothing you can do.
Mhm.
You can be at peace. You can be at peace, and you can know that it's not your fault. You don't have to live with the guilt and shame that your spouse left you. Now, I'm not saying you need to get married. And I'm not promoting remarriage, divorce, remarriage. That's a whole different topic. I'm not promoting any of that. But I'm saying in that case, if your unbelieving spouse leaves you, Paul says that you are not to blame. You can be, that sound right?
Mhm.
You can be at peace. So we start wrapping this up. I'm going to do some rapid fire questions to Lori real quick,
Oh.
and it ain't gonna take long. So we're gonna talk about two situations. We're gonna talk about first is this equally yoked or unequally yoked. All right, and then we're gonna talk about should you stay married or not stay married. That's what it's gonna be: stay married or not stay married.
Okay.
So the first one is it unequally yoked or is it not? Yeah.
Okay.
So or the way say a valid marriage or unequally yoked. A white Christian woman married to a black Christian man.
That is not an equally yoked.
That's a valid
It's
marriage.
a valid marriage. Yeah.
No problem. No problem with that marriage. We don't see any issues. No issues. So a Christian man, regardless of color, race, ethnicity, married to an atheist woman.
That is unequally yoked.
Unequally yoked. We do not endorse that marriage. If you're married, just like Paul says, if the marriage is good, you got to stay together. But we do not endorse a Christian man seeking to marry an atheist woman.
Yep.
You should not do that. It's not going to be good. It's not going to be fruitful. All right, next one. A Mormon man married to a Baptist woman.
Nope.
That's not good. That's unequally yoked. I know Mormons, they call themselves Latter-day Saints. They dropped the Mormon, and then they're petitioning for the Christian label. Anyway, that's the different faith.
Yeah.
All right, a Baptist woman married to a Pentecostal man.
No.
That's unequally yoked. You may say, well, they're both Christians. Yeah, but they're not the same faith and belief. Their faith is miles apart. And like I said before, the chances are that Baptist man's going to, the Baptist woman is going to have to become a Pentecostal. Or, there's not going to be a compromise here. Not. It's not going to work. Okay, so now, stay
Just
married.
With my parents, my mom had to become Catholic. Yeah.
Yep. They never reconcile their differences. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Stay married or separate. We'll just say separate. I don't like using divorce. Stay married or separate.
Okay.
A Christian woman already married to a non-believer, and he treats her well.
Stay married.
Stay married. Like, hey, if they agree to live with each other and they're living in harmony, other than the fact that she's a Christian and he's not, that doesn't constitute divorce or separation. A Christian man already married to a woman who she just wants to focus, the wife, she just wants to focus on her career. She don't want to go to church, but she treats the husband well. Stay married or separate.
I would say stay married.
Stay married, like it or not.
That's a hard one, but
it's a hard one. It's a hard one. That Christian man's got to set a good example.
Yep.
Love her no matter what. And she may not respect him and submit to him, but he's still got to love her unconditionally. That's tough. These are tough situations.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're throwing them out here. Hey, and this is the last one. A man and a woman who have been married for many years. Okay. Mm-hmm. They started off just like the Corinthians, non-Christians. Neither one of them cared about God. They've been married for many years. And then all of a sudden, the wife becomes a Christian. Maybe she got friends that influenced her, whatever it was, at work or whatever, and she starts going to church. And the husband's like, I don't like this. He starts showing anger and resentment. And he says, you need to quit going to that church. She's like, no, I'm going to go. You need to go with me. I ain't going to no church with you. And he ups and leaves. Gone. He's out. What should she do?
She should, if he seeks divorce, then she should let him do that. And then, just seek forgiveness and healing, because if they leave or they refuse to stay, you can't really do anything about that. So
that's it. And then one more thing. What advice would you give to a Christian, young person, old person, don't matter, a Christian person dating someone or looking to date someone who is not a Christian?
Well, first of all, I would say look to date someone who is a Christian. But if you are friendly with somebody that's not a Christian and you're thinking about dating them, I would strongly recommend against that. But even though you think you might be able to change their mind, I wouldn't recommend getting into any kind of a serious relationship where you're even thinking about like a lifelong commitment with them, because it's probably not going to work. You're probably setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yep. Okay, so that's it. We're going to be going on our spring break weekend getaway next week, so we're going to be away from the YouTube for a couple weeks. So, but I got some ideas. I'm working on something. We are in the process of leaving the Southern Baptist convention type churches, and we're going Reformed Baptist. We found a Reformed Baptist church where we live, and that's a big change. So it got me thinking, in marriages, you got to be able to withstand the changes in marriage. So I think we're going to talk about how to withstand the changes in marriage and some of the things that we went through. We might talk about becoming Reformed Baptist. It's a good thing. So I'm writing a book. That's another thing. I'm writing a book. She's encouraged me to about marriage.
Yep.
From all the stuff that we've been talking about and I've been learning and researching. It's going to be Bible based, straight off the Bible. Start with Genesis and some of the stuff that we've already talked about. It's in there. I just finished my chapter on being unequally yoked. Lori is a school teacher. So when I'm done, she's going to proofread it and edit it and put a bunch of red ink on it. I got to go back and take another 2 or 3 months to fix it.
Oh.
I hope so. I hope she does. So make sure it's right. But we'll keep you posted, and we will let you know how you can, when it's done, when it's published, how you can get that book. And I'm always working on blogs. I got a new blog. We're going to put that, I'm going to put a link to that. It's about unequally yoked and I got a picture of the ox and donkey.
Yep.
On my website, ChristCenteredMarriage.com, ChristCenteredMarriage.com. I will post that in the link so you can see that. Check out my video about being unequally yoked. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have not done already, subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. Tell everybody else about us, because we're here to help you. We're not here to make money. If it happens one day, it does. We're not looking for that right now. We just want to reach out to you because we were inspired a couple years ago at a marriage conference to reach out to others, because we've learned things at a weekend marriage conference in a conference room in Branson that we've never heard in church.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to get this out. We got to help people. So we're getting this out to you. Hopefully some churches are doing better at this. They are. Uh, so I'm working on something for after we come back from spring break. I think it's gonna be overcoming difficulties in marriage. And you got anything else to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, thank you for watching, and see you next time. God bless.